Good evening. This is David Utton in the Channel One America War Room. This is continuing coverage of the situation that's going on with the conflict over in Iran this evening and Israel, with the Middle East situation that is continues to evolve there minute by minute as the U.S. struck three military facilities in the area last night. And we have reports of considerable damage in the area as a result of what happened there. Let's get the very latest on what's going on. We have team coverage throughout the evening. Let's get the latest on what's going on at the moment as we get the very latest from Sky News.
Attacking Iran is an intervention by an American president with unpredictable consequences. The U.S. says it's in touch with Tehran, privately and publicly, giving it every opportunity to come to the table for talks and for peace. If this decision has been criticized internationally, it has been domestically too. Many in the MAGA movement, which put Donald Trump in power, are unhappy at his engagement in a foreign conflict. Many in Congress are unhappy that he didn't inform them first. A world that waited for America to strike now waits for Iran to strike back. The United States has spoken of an attack of precision and certainty. Neither applies to what comes next. James Matthews, Sky News in Washington.
This is a tornado warning.
We have a new tornado warning now for Kashingin County in Minnesota. A severe thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado was located 14 miles southeast of at 25 miles an hour. Again, a new tornado warning for Kashingin County in Minnesota for the next 36 minutes. Take shelter now in basement, center part of your house, away from windows. This continuing coverage of breaking news and severe weather, live from the War Room on Channel One America and Stormwatch America.
Was one strike, one series of strikes, and a line drawn. Iran then comes to the negotiating table or conforms to what America is demanding that it does, which is quit altogether its nuclear program. It is hard at the moment to see that happening, but the fact that he's now flirting with regime change, that is significant indeed. The second, and linked to what I just said, the second post, he talks about, in another post, about the damage to Iran's nuclear sites is monumental. The hits were hard and they were accurate. Great skill was shown by our military. This is kind of pushing back on a few noises that we've heard over the course of the day from different people, some indeed within his administration, suggesting that maybe these strikes last night were not as monumental as first thought. Donald Trump saying it completely destroyed Iran's nuclear programs. Since then, we've heard J.D. Vance, the vice president, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the top general as well, saying, look, it's going to take a little time to work out how successful these strikes were. And behind the scenes, experts have said to us repeatedly, you can't completely remove Iran's nuclear program just by airstrikes. And then finally, we've had word that the B-2 bombers who carried out this raid have now returned to their base in Missouri. Donald Trump said the great B-2 pilots have just landed safely in Missouri. Thank you for a job well done. These pictures from Missouri, from the Whitman Air Force Base. An extraordinary, I mean, in simple military terms, an absolutely extraordinary mission. They flew for 37 hours non-stop. They were refueled multiple times in the air. A whole load of planes around them as they made that journey across the Atlantic into the Middle East, dropped those bunker busters, and then returned to Missouri.
Well, Iran's immediate response to the U.S. attack involved firing more than 40 missiles towards Israel. Sirens blared in major cities and several buildings sustained extensive damage. It comes as Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said his country is close to achieving its goal of destroying Iran's nuclear program. Sky's Cordelia Lynch reports now on what impact the strikes will have on Israel.
Glass-filled streets, scattered shrapnel, and the skeletons of homes. The people of Ramat Aviv woke with a shuddering jolt, and buildings decimated by an Iranian missile. Orly is picking up what little of her life she can.
I'm living in the apartment over the other side. The apartment itself is ruined totally.
These are images from inside, the attack wiping out nearly everything she owned. America has now got involved.
Yeah, I know.
How does that shift your view of this war?
I thought from the beginning that this is a justified war. I still think that. I hope it will make the war a little bit shorter, but other than that, it was a threat to Israel, and it's a threat that should be eliminated. And I hope they will do it fast, because the suffering is very, very hard.
But there were no casualties. A community safely hunkered down in shelters, the new normal in Israel. Animals, not bodies, being pulled from the wreckage. Are you surprised by the level of destruction?
Oh, yeah. I guess anyone would be surprised. It's not a nice thing to see, but lucky for us, it's only damage, no casualties.
Israel got the support of a superpower, the critical might of America's military. But that doesn't insulate it from further attacks.
When you're looking at number, Israel is doing an incredible job at intercepting the vast majority of those being targeted. But the point here isn't that there's rockets getting through. The point here is that there's rockets being fired at our civilian communities, and I can't emphasize that enough.
Well, here you can see up close homes completely destroyed. This is a residential neighborhood with a lot of apartment blocks, people's belongings here just hanging over the edge. And despite this intense level of destruction, what strikes you here is that so many people support what Israel is doing. They believe Benjamin Netanyahu needed to strike, and they welcome America's intervention. They hope and believe that might bring a quicker conclusion to this conflict.
It's not fear that hangs in the air in this neighborhood. It's hope, acceptance, and on the political stage, gratitude and platitudes.
Last night, President Donald Trump took a historic resolution, a resolution which can change the entire trajectory of the Middle East to a better future.
This may be a critical chapter, but it's not. Not the epilogue of the story. It's a moving conflict between two well-armed enemies, both political outliers. One that could easily spill across the region, with millions caught in the crossfire. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News, Tel Aviv, Israel.
Sir Keir Starmer told our political editor just days ago that he didn't see an American attack on Iran as imminent. After the attack, he urged de-escalation in the region and has now spoken to Donald Trump. Beth Rigby reports.
The Prime Minister was at his country retreat Chequers when the US struck Iran. Dawn breaking on a sleepless night for Sir Keir Starmer, who has for days been pressing Donald Trump to de-escalate. These strikes not what the Prime Minister wanted. Now his task to try to reassure. Lots of people watching you speak this morning will be very worried about the news overnight that the US has carried out 3 strikes on Iran. Does the UK support US strikes against Iran?
Well, we've long had concerns about the Iranian nuclear programme. and been very clear that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. The US has now taken action to alleviate that threat. It is important that we now de-escalate the situation, stabilise the region, and get the parties back around the table to negotiate. And I've been speaking with international leaders this morning to that end. So I want to reassure the British public that we're doing everything we can.
Do you agree escalation seems very real? And are you prepared to offer military support, UK military support, if needed?
Well, my focus is on de-escalating the situation. I accept your challenge that there is a risk of escalation. That's a risk to the region. It's a risk beyond the region. And that's why all our focus has been on de-escalating.
The PM treading carefully, offering neither overt support nor criticism of these attacks, as he went from making the statement to remotely joining an emergency Cobra meeting. Simply too many calls with world leaders to get back to London in time. Back in Downing Street, the Foreign Secretary and Middle East Minister into number 10. This is the first time the US has ever ordered airstrikes on Iran. It wasn't the outcome our Prime Minister was expecting when we spoke at the G7 in Canada, but days ago. It sounds like an American attack could be imminent. Do you know what's going on?
Well, I don't think you should read into that an American attack is imminent.
That prediction proved incorrect, a point I put to the PM today. He's done exactly the opposite of what you said you thought he was going to do. Do you feel foolish, frustrated that he's not listening?
Well, it's clearly a fast-moving situation, and there's been a huge amount of discussions in the days since the G7 ended, and the US has now taken the action to alleviate the threat that Iran's nuclear program poses.
Other politicians more fulsome in their support for Trump's strikes?
America's actions were absolutely essential. We have got to the stage, as we've seen actually in the last 9 days or so, where Iran coming to the negotiation table simply was not happening in any constructive way.
The Prime Minister's trying to reassure us today about these unprecedented strikes. He's hitting the phone, scrambling to try and de-escalate what is clearly a very dangerous and unfolding situation. But really, what's more instructive, I think, isn't what the Prime Minister has said, but what he hasn't said today, because the simple reality is that Trump isn't really listening to allies like the UK. That's worrying in itself, but it becomes even more alarming if this situation does escalate and the UK government is forced to take decisions around military intervention without much influence over the president. Everyone here nervously awaiting how Iran might respond. The UK now moving more military assets to the region. This PM deeply opposed to war, but stopping it not in his gift. Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Well, the Prime Minister spoke to Donald Trump last night for the first time since the US strikes on Iran. A Number 10 spokesperson said the leaders discussed the situation in the Middle East and reiterated the grave risk posed by Iran's nuclear program to national security. They discussed the actions taken by the United States last night to reduce the threat and agreed that Iran must never be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon. They discussed the need for Iran to return to the negotiating table as soon as possible and to make progress on a lasting settlement. Do stay with us here on Sky News. Coming up in the sport, the first test between England and India is evenly poised ahead of the fourth day at Headingley.
Okay, what we're going to do right now is switch over to, in case you didn't watch some of the coverage last night, we had a situation, and this has happened to a lot of the reporters, and this is everyday life actually for the people of Israel, but a CNN crew had to take shelter last night, into the bomb shelter as the alerts went off. This is when Iran struck right after the U.S. struck. About 20 missiles went into and we're going to show that to you now live. Well, this was recorded earlier in the day.
So these are the alerts that go out on all of our phones when you're in Israel. It's a 10-minute warning of incoming missiles or something incoming from Iran. So now the location we're in has a verbal alarm telling people to go down into bomb shelter. So we have about a 10-minute window to get down into a bomb shelter, and we'll continue to try to broadcast from that bomb shelter, and even if we can on the way down. Do you guys want to?
Should we go down, or you want to finish this?
Well, we should probably go down.
We should probably go down.
Let's just make sure. Do we have? Are we able to do that? Well, while they're just making sure we can get down there, let's talk about the Iranians' response.
So you've got the proxies as one response. You've got a direct attack from Iran on U.S. troops. That's what we saw after the killing of Qasem Soleimani. They hit Al Assad Air Base in Anbar province. Nobody was killed because they kind of had signaled in advance that they were going to do it, but nonetheless, it was the biggest ballistic missile strike on a U.S. base outside of the country. Then you have the possibility that they go for some kind of asymmetrical cyber terrorism, or that they go with an economic option like trying to close the Strait of Hormuz. People I've been talking to in the region seem to feel that Iraq is the most vulnerable place by virtue of the fact that it's a weak state. You have a lot of paramilitary forces there. The State Department's evacuated roughly 500 U.S. personnel from there. But also the broader consensus is that Iran wants to try to pick a move right now that will show strength or project strength to particularly its own people, while not trying to risk further retaliation, possibly trying to minimize casualties, because Iran has been significantly weakened, as we've all been talking about and watching.
There are so many questions right now about Iran's capabilities, right? I mean, this siren that's just coming in now, it's been 20 hours since the last Iranian attack. We saw that barrage just after 7:30 this morning. We know that they still do have ballistic missile capabilities, despite having destroyed about half of their launchers, according to the Israeli military. And so we'll see, you know, what more firepower they have for here, but also critically, of course, for those U.S. bases in the region, which will be easier for the Iranians to target.
All right, I think we're going to head down to the shelters. Chuck, do we have capabilities as we go down?
Just checking your microphone. Be ready in a second. Okay, here we go.
All right.
Okay.
Let's see if we can switch over. So is this actually working?
You guys hear him?
Okay. I'm not. Oh, get here.
What's your microphone?
Okay, I think it's.
Bring your IFB box. Bring your IFB box. Just unplug it.
Should we all go?
Yeah, I think we should all get one. So again, you can hear the sirens going off. This is from the hotel. They're warning all the hotel guests to go down. This is the first time today that we have had an alarm like this. It's obviously something that many here in Tel Aviv have gotten used to over the last 10 or 11 days since this began. We saw there was one alarm shortly after, or several hours after the first strike, the strikes on Iran by the United States. This is the first one we've had this morning. Hey. So I'm just gonna go down here. And here with Jeremy Diamond. So in terms of this is the first one today, isn't it?
It's the first one, not today, because 7 was the last one. I think we're all a little bit upside down.
3 a.m.
Oh, we're at 3 a.m. Yes, so it is the first one of the day. But what we've noticed, I think, is fewer barrages, but quite high intensity, particularly this morning. I mean, Jeremy, you were there on the scene. The damage was...
Yeah, I mean, there's also been reports that the Iranians have been using different types of ballistic missiles, some reports of cluster munition use as well, and we've seen the kind of impact that that can have on the scene. Today I was at a site in the north of Tel Aviv, in Ramat Aviv, where you saw a residential block that was almost, completely obliterated by the power of that blast.
You guys got to press down in the basement, please.
The damage is enormous. More of these ballistic missiles that are indeed getting through those air defense systems. But, quite incredibly, we haven't seen any fatalities in, I believe, a week now, right? The last Monday morning was the last time we saw a fatality. That's, of course, a credit to the aerial defense systems, but more importantly, perhaps, to the early warnings that are getting us into bomb shelters and getting millions of other Israelis.
Listen, paying $14.99 a month for a streaming app and $9.99 a month for a music app and
Yeah, and I'm going to take over here from the White House. Kristen Holmes, with senior White House correspondent, as they go into that shelter. We are losing service there, but we expect to get them back at any moment. Of course, hoping that they are safe as this is continuing. Now I think we have our signal back. Okay, great.
It is a luxury to have a 10-minute warning. Obviously, in a situation like this, in many cases, obviously, rockets from Gaza, generally there isn't that like a 10-minute window.
No, but it's a different level of threat, right? I mean, Israelis have been living with rockets from Hamas and Hezbollah for many years. I have never seen Israelis running to the shelter quite so quickly as they have with this, because it's a totally different ballgame. The damage and destruction that has been, been done by these Iranian ballistic missiles is completely different to anything they've seen in many decades.
And there's no question that without those warning sirens, without the bomb shelters, I mean, you would be seeing, many people dying in each one of these strikes. And the fact that the death toll is only 24 as of now in Israel is indeed a credit to all those systems that we've been talking about.
So we are awaiting what will be the red alert, which is the final minute and a half warning before any kind of an impact. I don't have communication with the so I can't actually go to anybody else. So we're stuck talking with each other. That's okay.
We'll muddle through it.
In terms of Iranian response, there's been a lot of questions about what is going to happen now. What will the Iranian response be? And obviously, these missiles are one form of response, but what we don't know yet are what decision has been made by Iranian leaders, who's going to be making that decision. Is it utilizing proxy forces, militias in Iraq, or what have you?
And Iran's foreign minister said today, basically, that it won't be the government who's making that decision, it will be the military that will make that decision. And they have a lot of different tools that they can draw upon, whether it's proxy forces, whether they go asymmetrical with a terror attack, for example, or kidnapping, or some kind of a cyber attack. But again, I mean, I mentioned it upstairs, but in the melee, I think it's worth reiterating this idea that there's a concern for Iran right now, right? They are hurting. They have incurred a lot of damage. They want to try to find some kind of a retaliation that potentially restores deterrent or at least projects some image of strength, particularly for Iranians. But what they don't want to do is do something that is so escalatory that it risks, and we've heard President Trump said, listen, we're going to draw a line under this if you take it on the chin, but if you keep going, you have a choice between, I believe he said, peace or tragedy. So I think for Iran, it's like that question of trying to find, oh no, we can hear the sirens now.
The sirens right now.
So that indicates 90 seconds roughly until...
Just listen.
Red alert. Red alert.
So this is the minute and a half or so warning.
And right now we're getting sirens all across the central part of Israel. This includes Tel Aviv and the surrounding suburbs. You have Petah Tikva, Ramat Gan, Rishon LeZion, Bat Yam. Those are some of the areas that have been hit over the course.
There's an app, Homefront Command here, what's called Homefront Command actually has an app that people can see. Is this a nationwide alert? Is this just in Tel Aviv, or where is it?
That's right. And you know, we have seen moments where the Iranians choose to fire missiles at the kind of major population centers, right? Haifa has been a big target in northern Israel. That is, of course, a strategic site as well, because there is a port, there's a naval base there, commercial shipping, all of that. Of course, we have seen these missiles very often striking residential areas, missing the port as it did the other day, for example. Then we've seen hits, of course, here in Tel Aviv and the surrounding area as well. There are several military bases, we should note, in the area additionally. And then in Beersheba, in the southern part of Israel, we saw that hospital, of course, in the last week, Soroka Medical Center, which was hit by an Iranian missile. And I also think that's...
We'll have more coming up in our next half hour around Atlanta, America, and the world. This is the Channel One America War Room. This is the Channel One America War Room. Thank you for joining us. I'm David Dutton from the Command Center in Atlanta. It's just after 10:30 on a Sunday evening. We're here with continuing coverage of the situation in the Middle East, the conflict. Now the U.S. has sort of got involved. Hopefully it's just a one-and-done situation. The United States struck 3 nuclear facilities yesterday evening, and considerable damage was done to all the facilities. Our coverage continues right now as we go over to Sky News.
Iraq and Saudi Arabia. Killing Americans might be a priority for Iran. Supporters who say America is getting to yet another Middle Eastern war, risking US lives. Iran could attack Americans directly with drones and missiles or use proxies in the Middle East. Hezbollah in Lebanon has been massively degraded by Israel. More likely, Iran would use Iraq or the Houthis based in Yemen, whose truce with the US. All that would invite massive retaliation, of course, from America, so Iran might prefer asymmetrical options. In that case, Britain could also be a target. Could all this lead to terror attacks in the UK? In the region, there are 2 stretches of water to worry about, both strategically vital. The Houthis could threaten shipping at sea, while Iran could directly target vessels in the Persian Gulf, as they've done before, harassing ships with smaller boats, firing rockets at them and seizing them. Now, if the Gulf goes up in flames, expect a big hit to the global economy and the price of oil too. The Iranians have threatened to shut off the Strait of Hormuz, this choke point through which a third of the world's seaborne oil passes. All this would send shockwaves through the world's financial markets. The US has massively increased its presence to retaliate to any retaliation, with no less than 3 aircraft carrier battle groups in the region. As things stand, this is almost certain to escalate, but could it also widen and suck other nations into the conflict? Russia and Iran have a strategic partnership agreement, but it doesn't require Moscow to come to Iran's support. Iran is also China's closest ally in the Middle East, but Beijing is also
likely to sit this one out, its thoughts, and watch from the sidelines. The priority for Iran's leadership is to survive, to fight another day, and redouble efforts eventually to build the bomb. If Israel can't change the regime in Iran, which isn't easy, it'll have to manage the Iranian threat and cut it down to size from time to time. That could mean years more military action and could be hugely costly for both Israel and its American backers. So Iran is in a very tight spot, but the future could be challenging for both Israel and America too.
Dominic Waghorn reporting there. Well, Donald Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton, said he supports the president's decision to attack Iran's nuclear facilities.
Well, I think Trump made the right decision for the United States in attacking the Iranian nuclear weapons program. I thought we should have done this for many years ago, up to 20 years, maybe even more. But it's better that it comes now than not at all or too late. I do think that there's plenty of work to do. I don't think anybody really believes that it's over on day one, and I think part of the problem that remains was caused precisely by Donald Trump agreeing to 60 days of negotiation with the Ayatollah Khamenei, during which time the regime, duplicitous as ever, was moving whatever it could to places like Natanz and Esfahan and Fordo. So negotiation time is always on the side of the nuclear proliferator, and that appears to be proven here again today.
OK, time now for a look at today's newspapers with Kamali Melbourne.
Hello there and welcome back. You're watching the Press Preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. Over the next half an hour, we'll see what's making headlines with the broadcaster and commentator Duncan Barks and the journalist Christina Patterson. Guys, thanks for being with us. So let's see what is on some of those front pages. We'll start with the Metro. The headline, hammered as America warns Iran of dire consequences unless it agrees to talks. An image of President Trump is on the front of the FT alongside US claims that it has inflicted extremely severe damage on Iran's nuclear facilities. The Daily Telegraph says the US has warned Iran that retaliating will be the worst mistake they've ever made. The Guardian leads with Iran's vow for revenge, though, amid fears that the strikes will lead to a more drawn-out war. The Times has the same promise. Well, the Eyes headline, Trump pushes the Middle East to the brink. The Daily Mail reports on fears that the US attack could leave allies, such as Britain, facing an increase in terror activity. The Daily Mirror says Keir Starmer has called for calm after the attack risked plunging the world into war. The Express reports the PM warning of an escalation in the Middle East. And the Sun headline, stick it up your bunker, alongside a picture of the Iranian leader. And finally, the Daily Star says that Oasis fans have Noel and Liam's mother to thank for the band's reunion tour. All right, as I said, tonight we're joined by Duncan and Christina. Guys, thanks for being with us. Let's get into it. We'll start with the front of the Financial Times. Picture of a fist-pumping Donald Trump there as he has declared victory, the Financial Times tells us.
Yeah, it's interesting language, isn't it? Because it's not really Trump's job to declare victory. So the FT has some interesting takes tonight as we go into Monday morning. Obviously got a picture there of Trump with his MAGA hat on as well. They've got a story a little bit further down as well, a bit of insight courtesy of Edward Luce, a piece he's written asking the question that all of us are asking tonight, which is what will happen next? And there's a lot of speculation that we might see Iran somehow attack UK assets, but that's not being confirmed. There's an interesting take on the front page of the FT here that Iran-backed Houthi militants in Yemen said they would resume targeting US vessels in the Red Sea. So that could be something else that could occur. And I think if that was to happen, Trump would see that as an attack and he would have to respond. So all of our, well, not all of our world leaders, but a number of world leaders, including our Prime Minister, are calling for a de-escalation. Yeah, and I think and it has to happen because I don't see what the alternative is.
This is the thing, that use of the language Pandora's box by Edward Luce is interesting because it's actually the way that it was referred to by the Russians in the UN Security Council.
Exactly. I listened to them when I was down in makeup, and I heard the guy say that, and I thought, I agree, and I don't agree with much that Russia says these days, but I do agree with Russia on this, and indeed with the FT. I mean, just look at the guy. He does not look. I mean, he was the person who criticised Biden for his, for being old and demented and so on. And this just does not look like someone who is fit to be making these kinds of decisions. And I'm afraid his hat says Make America Great Again. Does anybody believe any of this has anything to do with America? It is all about Donald Trump. It's about what he thinks will make him look good in the moment. And anybody who knows less about Middle East culture, Iran's culture and history, about the history of wars in the Middle East. I mean, this is a guy who said that Biden was the one who would start World War III and said no more forever wars. What he has done is incalculably dangerous. Nobody wants Iran to develop a nuclear bomb. There were negotiations going on which he blew apart during his first term, and then Israel again blew apart the latest negotiations by unilaterally bombing Tehran and other targets. And now Trump I think he sees this as a game. It's not about victory. And also, we don't know how much damage has been inflicted. No. Of course, he's claiming it's victory, but we literally do not know. There are reports that some uranium has been taken away from some of the sites, and it may have done, it may not have done. But whether or not Iran still has the ability to develop a nuclear bomb, I'm sure it wants to. I'm sure it probably will one day, and the world has got much, much less safe as a result of the action.
Just very quickly, on the front page of the FT, they do have another take here about how this decision will divide his core base. And they talk about when he was campaigning to become president, he said, look, make me president of the United States of America because I will ensure we do not get involved in other conflicts around the world. He's done the opposite of that, and the FT is saying that his base is split. So you've got some people saying you've done the right thing, but people like his advisor, Steve Bannon, saying, no, I think this is the wrong thing to do. So it'll be interesting domestically to see how people react to that.
Well, especially if there is an economic impact by the Straits of Hormuz being closed at all. Let's skip forward, if we can, to the Daily Express, because they've Express as well as the Mail have got a sort of a domestic focus on this and the potential risk blowback here from this, Duncan?
Yeah, so I think there are two potential avenues, if you like, here in terms of an escalation and what it means to the United Kingdom. We obviously have overseas assets that could be targeted by Iran or people in support of Iran. Noticeably, or chiefly, we have an RAF base in Cyprus that could be targeted. There's also a line that's developing tonight as well, that they don't necessarily have to be targets in terms of military targets. There could be a cyber attack in this country. I mean, there is a view that our intelligence services do spend quite a little time dealing with cyber attacks from various countries, hostile nations around the world. So there's that going on. But also, if you talk to people in the intelligence services, they will say their biggest fear is a lone wolf, someone who is not affiliated to a terrorist organisation or someone who is obvious, but someone who might be thinking, do you know what, I disagree with what's happened with Iran. The UK has not done enough to condemn it, so therefore I'm going to carry out some kind of atrocity. Yeah. And all of that is awful.
I mean, the world's already a dangerous enough place, and this has sort of ratcheted it up.
Absolutely. And I mean, most Iranians do not support their government. Well, we can't know, can we? But, it's a dictatorship and it's a very, very unpopular government, and the way it treats women is appalling, and people are tortured in jails and people are raped in jails, and there's very little support. But even if you don't support your government, ultimately, you're probably going to support your government in preference to a country that bombs your country without it didn't even have permission from its own government to do that. Trump did this unilaterally, and a number of American politicians are objecting to that and wanting to pass motions against that, saying he can't unilaterally start a war, and the American Constitution says he can't. But also, there are strong arguments that he broke international law, because Iran did not provoke America. It hasn't attacked America. It hasn't invaded America. There are rules of this stuff, and just Trump seems to disregard them all. So I think we can't for a moment disregard the possibility that Iranians feeling very upset and fed up with the whole thing might want to show any perceived allies of US make their feelings clear about that.
I mean, their argument, the US argument and the Israeli argument, is the imminent threat, isn't it? And that's what comes back to whether or not you agree or believe the security force's assessment of what's...
It is, and it's really interesting to debate what could happen or what should happen, because Iran want to develop nuclear capability. I don't think we want that to happen. So what is the answer?
And Iran have also explicitly called for the destruction of the state of Israel.
Well, they've called it, a cancer that needs to be removed. So, I mean, it's pretty damning stuff. So, I mean, but you look at it, can this be resolved by negotiation? Or do you have to hold your nose and sometimes go, well, Trump has done something here because he needs to focus their minds? I don't know what the answer is.
No, I mean, none of this is simple, none of it. And of course I understand why Israel feels under threat from Iran, although it seems to have brutally disabled most of Iran's proxies recently, and that has been the chief form of attacking Israel and in fact, asserting Iran's interests globally and geopolitically. So I don't know how much threat Israel was currently under with Iran. Of course they don't want Iran to have a nuclear bomb. Nobody wants Iran to have a nuclear bomb. But is this the correct response? I don't think it is.
And as we said, this government and allies in Europe have called for de-escalation. Diplomacy has failed so far. We'll find out what the next few days bring on this. Of course, it's a story that just keeps on developing. Duncan, Christina, thank you very much for now. All right, well, still to come, we'll have more from the morning's newspapers, including this story on the front of the Star, as Oasis fans have Noel and Liam's mum to thank for the band getting back together. We'll discuss that and plenty more.
Big stories don't always come from big cities. I'm Lisa Dowd and I'm Sky's Midlands correspondent.
You are not getting in this elevator, okay?
The judge made it very clear that she could see no justifiable reason why Sakulas wasn't here facing British justice.
I promised I would get him justice.
Free, wherever you get your news. This is what they're up against. The wind is the really big problem. It is back-breaking work and the smoke is thick. It's been working well. Water levels are dropping, but no one knows what impact further rain will have. What would you do if this place wasn't open? This is the exact spot in Nottingham where their 19-year-old son, Barnaby Webber, lost his life.
I just think it's so cruel and so harsh.
It's really scary. We're terrified.
In this community, I'm told that everybody knows someone affected by COVID.
Hopefully this will be the last wave.
Sky News gets the full story first. Change seems tantalisingly close in this corner of the UK. Wales was the first to introduce the plastic bag charge. It's legal to let go. Set the speed and take the hands off. It's almost driverless, but not quite. Hans is a highly trained police dog. The force is incredible. It's really frightening, actually. This is my patch, my specialism. It's also my home.
I want to start the programme today with a name, a story that I can't get out of my head. The campaign has now started. This is your chance. Tell people. This is the Politics Hub. It's not correct. The tax burden is projected to go up.
No, I am talking about...
No, but I'm not. This is my interview. Look, this is ridiculous. No one does.
It's 10:51 Eastern Time. We're live from Atlanta. We're continuing coverage of Channel 1 America War Room. Thank you for joining us. I'm David Dett from the Command Center in Atlanta. We are going to continue our coverage now as we go to another source. Please stand by for a moment. This is Channel One America. Let's get the very latest as our live team coverage continues now from ABC News.
At Iran's nuclear facilities, what we know, how successful were the strikes, President Trump's message a short time ago. Tonight, the Pentagon now providing new details how they pulled this off in complete secrecy. We have new satellite images tonight, what they reveal, and now the U.S. on heightened alert as Iran warns of retaliation. Tonight here, Operation Midnight Hammer, the first images showing the precision U.S. strike targeting 3 Iranian nuclear sites, including Fordo, deep beneath the mountain. Explosions seen in the distance. The U.S. launching the largest strike by a dozen B-2 bombers, dropping never-before-used 30,000-pound bombs. Satellite images showing all 3 sites suffering major damage. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth before the cameras today, revealing how they pulled off this high-stakes mission. Decoy planes flying toward Guam, the actual bombers flying in the other direction undetected. And what we're now learning about when President Trump gave the order. Tonight, the images that suggest Iran might have moved some nuclear material in the days before the attack. Ian Panel standing by with new reporting and details from inside the operation. Tonight, assessing the damage done to Iran. In his address to the nation, the president last night speaking of the strike, saying Iran's key enrichment facilities have been totally obliterated. Tonight, Vice President J.D. Vance not going that far, and this evening the concern for American troops across the region amid these threats of retaliation. Mary Bruce and Martha Raddatz and what their sources are telling them tonight. The threat here at home, U.S. law enforcement on high alert across the country, and the new warning from the Department of Homeland Security. Pierre Thomas standing by on that. Also, the other news this Sunday night, the deadly boating accident capsizing in gusting winds. At least 6 people killed, 2 missing. The urgent search at this hour. And the deadly storms and life-threatening heat in the east. 3 people, including twin sisters, killed outside Syracuse, New York, in Oneida County. Multiple reports of trees onto homes. 150 million Americans on alert for extreme heat now from Kansas all the way to the Northeast. It'll feel like 110 in Washington, D.C., 105 in Philadelphia and New York City. World News Tonight begins now.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with
Good evening. We are here on this Sunday night after the major U.S. strikes on Iran, now directly involved in this conflict. And we are learning much more tonight, some 24 hours after U.S. bombs and missiles struck Iran's 3 key nuclear facilities. A fleet of B-2 bombers, some of them decoys, some taking off from the U.S. for Guam, others then taking off in the other direction for Iran, going undetected. The B-2 bombers dropping those 30,000-pound bombs for the first time as part of this massive strike on Iran. President Trump overnight addressing the nation, calling the operation a spectacular military success. Critics on the Hill tonight warning of what could come next, with Iran now saying it will retaliate. The first video tonight coming in from inside Iran, an explosion and then a fireball near Iran's Isfahan nuclear facility. Tonight, military officials now describing the high-stakes mission involving 125 aircraft, including 1 group of B-2 bombers taking off from Missouri, heading to the west as a decoy, and then to Iran. Those B-2 bombers dropping 14 massive ordnance penetrator bombs capable of penetrating deep underground on Iran's Fordo and Natanz nuclear sites. This is an animation of clear to those bombs penetrated beneath the earth. In addition, Tomahawk missiles from a U.S. submarine striking the third site, Isfahan. Tonight, satellite images right here of that site 1 week ago, and this satellite image of the Isfahan nuclear site tonight. You can see the evidence of the damage. And this evening here, new questions about Fordo. Satellite images from the days before the strikes show a line of trucks on a service road there. Was Iran moving nuclear material in the days before the attack? Tonight, President Trump saying Iran must now make peace, warning of additional targets if they do not. We begin tonight here with our chief foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, in Tel Aviv tonight with new reporting, new details inside those 25 minutes over Iran.
Tonight, the first video emerging from the US's audacious attack on 3 Iranian nuclear sites. A fireball lighting the night sky. Explosions heard in the distance at Iran's Isfahan nuclear facility, part of the barrage that included the biggest strike by B-2 stealth bombers in US history. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth before the cameras today.
This is a plan that took months and weeks of positioning and preparation so that we could be ready when the President of the United States called.
President Trump giving the final order for Operation Midnight Hammer last night, a highly classified, top-secret mission that only a handful of US officials knew about, and one that was full of deception.
It took a great deal of precision, it involved misdirection, and the highest of operational security.
About a dozen B-2 bombers taking off from Missouri early Saturday morning, with a decoy group of about half of them heading west towards Guam with trackable movements. And while the world was looking the other way, a short time later, 7 more B-2s taking off, but this time heading in the opposite direction, to the east, directly towards Iran, with no transponders and minimal communications. Those bombers completing multiple mid-air refuelings throughout the 18 hours it took to fly to Iran, the longest since right after the 9/11 attacks, and once over land, linking up with additional support aircraft. The Pentagon saying the 25-minute mission inside Iranian airspace began at 6:40 p.m. Eastern. A first wave of US fighter jets sweeping in front of the B-2s to protect them from possible enemy missiles and warplanes, all part of the deception. Then a lead B-2 bomber dropping the first 2 30,000-pound bunker-busting bombs called the Massive Ordnance Penetrator, or MOPS, on Iran's Fordo nuclear site, buried deep under a mountain.
The remaining bombers then hit their targets as well, with a total of 14 MOPS dropped against 2 nuclear target areas.
Those massive bombs hitting facilities at both Fordo and Natanz, marking the first time they've been used on the battlefield.
We are currently unaware of any shots fired at the U.S. strike package on the way in. Iran's fighters did not fly, and it appears that Iran's surface-to-air missile systems did not see us.
Right after those bunker-busting bombs struck, U.S. missiles hitting a third target.
A U.S. submarine in the Central Command Area of Responsibility launched more than 24 Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles against key surface infrastructure targets at Isfahan.
In total, 125 aircraft and 75 precision-guided weapons were used. New before and after satellite images showing the destruction left behind at these sites. What appears to be extensive damage at buildings in Isfahan and in Natanz, an 18-foot wide hole directly over part of the underground military complex there.
Final battle damage will take some time, but initial battle damage assessments indicate that all 3 sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction.
But questions tonight about the impact of those US attacks and whether Iran preempted them. Satellite images from the days before the strike showing unusual activity at the Fordo nuclear site. A line of trucks seen on a service road. It's unclear if Iran anticipated the bombings and moved nuclear material beforehand. Just hours after the US strike, Iran retaliating, firing around 20 ballistic missiles at Israel. Massive destruction here in northern Tel Aviv. You can see the clear-up operation underway, but just look at the destruction to what was a residential apartment block. Again, Iran responding after those American attacks. Iran calling the attack outrageous and a breach of international law, threatening a heavy response and warning US bases in the region are vulnerable to attack. President Trump addressing the nation after the attack, saying Iran must now make peace, warning Iran and its proxies against any retaliation against the US, saying the US will hit more targets with precision, speed and skill.
Tonight I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success.
And late today, those B-2 bombers that hit Iran safely returning home to Missouri. Our affiliate, KMBC, was there some 36 hours after they began their mission.
A great sight to see those B-2 bombers back on the ground here in the U.S. Let's get right back to Ian Pannell live tonight in Tel Aviv. Ian, you and I were on the air last night here after these attacks were revealed. As we know, there are tens of thousands of U.S. troops stationed across the region. Obviously, major concern with Iran saying it will retaliate. The safety of U.S. troops throughout the Middle East of utmost importance tonight.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, the president just posting about the B-2's landing, saying they've landed safely in Missouri. Thank you for a job well done. But yes, tens of thousands, around 40,000 troops still in the region. Extra security precautions have now been put in place. Iran, though, saying later today that it was the US that decided to destroy diplomacy with last night's strike and that the Iranian military will, quote, decide the timing, nature and scale of its response. David.
Ian Pannell, who was on the air with us deep into the night last night, back here again tonight, and we appreciate it. Thank you, Ian.
If you black like me and you got type 2, I gotta be real with you. You ever stop and wonder if them treatments out there was only made for white folks? Ever seen someone in your family, or maybe even you, taking all the meds, doing everything they said, and somehow it's still your fault when things don't work out? Everything they research, study, make money on, it ain't for us. It's for the folks that got the cash. Sounds crazy, right? But I'm here to tell you there is a way out. About 6 months ago, I started noticing something. A few folks, real quiet, talking about a group of black scientists who found something that could change everything. The problem? Every time the news starts to spread, it gets taken down like somebody don't want us to know. But I'm not about to stay quiet. This ain't no rumor. It's real. And I've been trying it myself for 3 months now. But let me be straight with you. This ain't just about type 2 diabetes. It's deeper than that. It's what we call black pancreatic cell syndrome, because that's what's really going on in our bodies. You ain't got this because of bad luck or bad genes. You got it because nobody ever studied our bodies like they should have. And once you see that, the answer becomes so much clearer. This ain't your fault, but now it is your responsibility. And yes, there's something you can do. It all starts with 1 glass in the morning before you eat a single thing. That's it. And that's why they don't want this info out there, because it's simple. And in today's world, they'd rather keep things complicated for us. 3 weeks, that's all it takes. Your sugar can drop, stay under 90. You'll feel more energy, sleep better, lose that stubborn weight, and finally feel like you again. When I first got diagnosed, my sugar was at 240. I was scared, overwhelmed, anxious, but once I found this natural method, my levels dropped to 82, and I felt better than I had in years. I had saved the video that explains every single step, and I'm dropping it here for you. You can start tonight, right there at home. Click that button and see it for yourself. Don't matter your age, your story, or how long you've been fighting. If you're tired of the constant fatigue, the thirst, the crashes, stop everything and listen. This 30-second trick might be the thing that changes everything. Click now. Find out the truth before they take this video down, just like the others. Big Pharma already tried to erase it. I'm updating the site every 2 minutes just to keep it alive, so go ahead and click. Watch it. And if it speaks to you, share it. Help someone else see what's real. This chronic disease, it ain't the life sentence they told us it was. Click below and take back your power.
President Trump tonight calling the operation a spectacular success. Overnight in his address to the nation, saying the strikes totally obliterated those 3 nuclear enrichment sites. Tonight, Vice President Vance not going that far. The Pentagon also cautioning it is still too early to tell the extent of the damage. Here's ABC's chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, tonight.
Tonight, 24 hours after President Trump launched that massive attack on Iran, questions remain over how much damage was done to Iran's nuclear program. The president last night claiming it was destroyed.
Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
Today, Vice President J.D. Vance not going that far, saying instead that Iran's nuclear program was substantially set back.
We set the Iranian nuclear program back substantially last night. Whether it's years or beyond that, we know it's going to be a very long time before Iran can even build a nuclear weapon if they want to. We feel very confident that the Fordow nuclear site was substantially set back, and that was our goal.
Tonight, we're learning more about what led up to the president's decision to strike Iran. A senior administration official telling ABC News he was hoping for a diplomatic solution up to the final days. Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff leading that effort. The president himself talking with Turkish President Erdogan, hoping Turkey could help facilitate talks with Iran. But it was not to be. Sources tell us Iran's supreme leader, fearing for his life, went into hiding and was unable to approve the meeting. As diplomacy faltered, the Pentagon working on a parallel track to prepare the attack. The president giving the final order yesterday, just minutes before. Today, ABC's John Carl asking the vice president.
The big question is the United States now at war with Iran?
No, we're not at war with Iran, John. We're at war with Iran's nuclear program.
The vice president insisting the U.S. is not seeking regime change, noting the U.S. did not hit any civilian or military targets.
If you look at what we did, it was very precise, very narrowly tailored to our objective. And if the Iranians decide to expand this, then that's ultimately their decision, and the President of the United States will respond in kind.
Echoing the president's warning from last night that the U.S. has other targets in its sights if Iran chooses to retaliate.
If peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill.
So let's get right back to Mary Bruce, live again tonight at the White House. And Mary, Vice President Vance, as you reported there, saying the U.S. also is not seeking regime change in Iran. He said that today. But we also know that just a short time ago, a somewhat different message from President Trump when it comes to the leaders of Iran.
David, the president just now suggesting that maybe there should be a change in leadership, saying, quote, if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? This as the president continues to push for those talks and warn against retaliation. David.
Mary Bruce back with us tonight. Mary, thank you. And tonight, as we reported here off the top, the concern for U.S. troops across the Middle East now. More than 40,000 deployed across the region. ABC's Martha Raddatz with us. And Martha, you have new reporting here. What's being done to protect U.S. troops?
Well, David, there's no question that these 40,000 troops could be targeted by Iran, with American forces spread from Iraq, Bahrain, Qatar, and Syria. The U.S. military is doing whatever they can to protect the forces. Patriot missile batteries are in place that can bring down Iranian rockets or missiles, as well as systems called CRAMs, large radar-guided high-speed guns that can track and shoot down incoming rocket and mortar fires. Additional fighter jets have also been sent F-22s, F-35s, and the USS Carl Vinson Carriel Battle Group is currently in the Arabian Sea. But remember, in 2020, after the U.S. killed the head of Iran's Revolutionary Guard, Qasem Soleimani, I was there in Iran when they launched a dozen missiles at the Al-Assad Air Base in Iraq, leaving about 100 American troops injured with mild traumatic brain injury. So the Pentagon remains on edge tonight and on very high alert. David?
In addition to all the families back here at home worried about loved ones, Martha Raddatz with us. Martha, thank you. Now to those 30,000-pound bombs used in conflict for the first time. Let's bring in ABC's military analyst, former Marine Colonel Steve Ganyard, back with us. And Steve, this is the first time that the U.S. has used these bunker buster bombs in combat. I'm curious, what do we know about the damage so far? I know it's still early, but what do we know about the damage they caused?
The irony, David, is we probably won't know, because remember that these halls that they were attacking, these enrichment halls, are 200 to 300 feet below ground. Now, we've seen some satellite imagery that shows what looked to be puncture marks. We know that the president was happy with it. So if the Iranians don't hit back at the U.S. or its allies, this could be the end of the U.S. involvement. If they do come back, as Martha noted, at U.S. troops in the region or allies in the region, this could be the beginning of something more prolonged and bigger for the U.S.
Colonel Steve Ganyard back with us here. Steve, thank you. We're going to turn to the potential threat here at home as well. There's the new warning tonight from the Department of Homeland Security. Our Chief Justice Correspondent Pierre Thomas back with us tonight. Pierre, how are U.S. officials cautioning local officials to prepare here, and what have you learned?
David, today FBI and Homeland Security officials hosted conference calls with the nation's governors and top law enforcement officials to discuss how the U.S. missile strikes in Iran impact an already dangerous threat environment here at home. You can see stepped up security today in Los Angeles, New York, and here in the nation's capital. And today, Homeland Security issuing a bulletin calling on the public to report anything suspicious, with Secretary Noem stating that what's happening in Iran brings the potential for increased threats to the homeland, including in the form of possible cyber attacks and acts of violence. David?
All right, our coverage of the U.S. strikes on Iran for this evening, Pierre, thank you. In the meantime, the other major news this Sunday night, deadly storms and more than 150 million Americans now on alert from Nebraska to the Northeast for life-threatening heat. And ahead of the extreme heat, heavy rain storms triggering dangerous flash flooding. Images from central New York, 3 people killed, including 2 children in the town of Clark Mills outside Syracuse in Oneida County. Here's Morgan Norwood tonight.
Tonight, at least 3 dead outside Syracuse, New York, after powerful storms flooded roads and snapped trees and power poles. In the hamlet of Clark Mills in Oneida County, trees on homes. Authorities here say 3 people were killed, including 6-year-old twin girls. New York's governor declaring a state of emergency for the storms. And for the first major heat wave of the summer that's starting to strangle the Northeast, life-threatening, record-breaking temperatures on tap from New York to Philly to Boston. And after those deadly twisters tore through parts of North Dakota, killing at least 3 people, some of the same areas are now under a new tornado watch, the threat of more heat-fueled storms growing tonight.
And David, heat kills thousands each year, more than any other type of extreme weather. And here in New York City, air quality alerts up for tomorrow, with officials warning people, especially those sensitive groups, to take this heat seriously. David?
No question about that. Morgan, thank you. Let's get right to meteorologist Brittany Bell from our New York station, WABC. Brittany?
David, this first major heat wave of the season could be life-threatening. So let's get right to the alerts stretching from Louisiana all the way to Maine, including an excessive heat warning that includes major cities like Washington, D.C. and Boston. High temperatures in D.C. could get at or above 100 degrees on Monday and Tuesday, and areas like New York and other locations could even challenge record high temperatures. The humidity even making it feel as high as 110 degrees. Now, looking ahead to the overnight lows, no relief there, only dropping down into the upper 70s and the lower 80s. David? All right, Brittany, great to have you on a Sunday night. Thank you. When we come back, remembering a beloved actress known for her roles in Sanford & Son and The Waltons. And the boating tragedy tonight amid gusting winds, at least 6 people dead when their boat capsized, and the urgent search at this hour for people still missing. We'll be right back.
You're watching Channel 1 America.
California. Authorities say at least 6 people were killed. 2 others are still missing at this hour after their boat capsized during a vicious storm. Winds gusting up to 35 miles an hour, waves up to 8 feet high. 2 others rescued. They're being treated tonight for hypothermia and other injuries. When we come back here on a Sunday night, we remember a beloved actress from Sanford & Son and The Waltons. Tonight, we learned that actress Lynn Hamilton has died of natural causes. Best known for her roles in Sanford & Son, The Waltons, and Roots: The Next Generation, Lynn Hamilton was 95 years old. When we come back here tonight, the B-2 bombers back in Missouri at this hour, and what President Trump just said about the pilots. Before we go tonight, President Trump this evening praising the B-2 pilots who have just returned from their mission over Iran. Late today, the president posting, "The great B-2 pilots have just landed safely in Missouri. Thank you for a job well done." President Trump now warning Iran must now make peace. Of course, the world awaiting Iran's response, Iran saying it will respond. Thank you for watching. Game 7 of the NBA Finals moments from now. I'll see you tomorrow night. Good night.
Thank you for making World News Tonight with David Muir, America's most watched newscast.
That was the very latest on the situation in the Middle East right now from ABC News. And what we're going to do now is, in just a few moments, we're going to get local reaction of the situation that happened over there and the president's decision to strike 3 Iranian nuclear facilities within the past 24 hours. And we're going to get an update on security measures at every major city in the U.S., including Atlanta, that's happened since then, including the New York City that has added more police officers to religious sites, in particular Jewish sites. It's 11:17 on a Sunday night, and this is Channel 1 America's continuing coverage live from the War Room. I'm David Dutton from the Command Center in Atlanta. As ABC News was sharing a few moments ago, a tornado watch was in effect for the northern tier of the country this evening. We've been bringing you tornado warnings this evening as well. So we cover you with breaking news and severe weather simultaneously as events warrant. And the second a tornado warning is issued for any county in America, we'll bring that to you live. So while we're waiting to go to our local newscasts, waiting for the NBA final to end, it should be ending here momentarily. Let's go back over to Sky News for a moment for continuing coverage, and we'll be back here shortly.
That prediction proved incorrect, a point I put to the PM today. He's done exactly the opposite of what you said you thought he was going to do. Do you feel foolish, frustrated that he's not listening?
Well, it's clearly a fast-moving situation, and there's been a huge amount of discussions in the days since the G7 ended, and the US has now taken the action to alleviate the threat that Iran's nuclear program poses.
Other politicians more fulsome in their support for Trump's strikes?
America's actions were absolutely essential. We have got to the stage, as we've seen actually in the last 9 days or so, where Iran coming to the negotiation table simply was not happening in any constructive way.
The Prime Minister's trying to reassure us today about these unprecedented strikes. He's hitting the phone, scrambling to try and de-escalate what is clearly a very dangerous and unfolding situation. But really, what's more instructive, I think, isn't what the Prime Minister has said, but what he hasn't said today, because the simple reality is that Trump isn't really listening to allies like the UK. That's worrying in itself, but it becomes even more alarming if this situation does escalate and the UK government is forced to take decisions around military intervention without much influence over the president. Everyone here nervously awaiting how Iran might respond. The UK now moving more military assets to the region. This PM deeply opposed to war, but stopping it not in his gift. Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Well, the Prime Minister spoke to Donald Trump last night for the first time since the US strikes on Iran. A Number 10 spokesperson said the leaders discussed the situation in the Middle East and reiterated the grave risk posed by Iran's nuclear program to international security. They discussed the actions taken by the United States last night to reduce the threat and agreed that Iran must never be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon. They discussed the need for Iran to return to the negotiating table as soon as possible and to make progress on a lasting settlement. Do stay with us here on Sky News. Coming up in the sport, the first test between England and India is evenly poised ahead of the fourth day at Headingley. Welcome back. Now, the US Defense Secretary was clear the strikes had devastated the Iranian nuclear program, but Tehran has denied it suffered a major blow. The world's nuclear watchdog says it's detected no increases in radiation from the 3 sites, which may indicate that nuclear material had already been removed. Our science and technology editor Tom Clark looks at the damage done by the US strikes.
It was a massive display of force and a series of firsts. The largest ever operational deployment of American B-2 bombers, armed for the first time with 14 of these, its most powerful bunker-busting bombs. Operation Midnight Hammer involved 7 B-2 bombers, 125 warplanes in total, as well as warships and submarines that hurled as many as 75 precision weapons at Iran's nuclear facilities in just 25 minutes. The Pentagon saying the first B-2 dropped its massive ordnance penetrator, or MOP, in the early hours of the morning.
As the president stated last night, the remaining bombers then hit their targets as well, with a total of 14 MOPs dropped against 2 nuclear target areas.
One was the Natanz uranium enrichment facility, its underground centrifuge halls targeted that Israeli raids couldn't reach last week. But the toughest target was Fordo, believed to be Iran's most sophisticated uranium enrichment plant, 60 miles south of Tehran, built in tunnels shielding 80 meters of mountain above, beyond the reach of even a 13-ton bunker-buster bomb, but not perhaps 12 of them. In this satellite image from before the attack, you can see Fordo's security perimeter and 3 tunnel entrances. Compare that to after the strike, these grey areas, presumably dust and debris from the attack zone here. Take a closer look. This was the mountainside before the raid, and here you can see 2 distinct strike zones, each hit with at least 3 bombs. Analysts suggest these details may be ventilation shafts, potential weak points chosen so the bombs carried their explosive payload as deep as possible. So was Donald Trump right to claim Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated? Evidence suggests otherwise. Satellite images support Iran's claims that it removed highly enriched uranium and equipment from Fordo before the attack and filled in its tunnel entrances.
Trump's statement that the whole thing has been obliterated implies that, yes, Fordo might have been, but the actual material, certainly the knowledge, and many enrichment machines have been moved, and hence that may be a setback for a few months, but it certainly has not wiped out their capability.
The real impact on Iran's nuclear ambitions won't be known until the dust from this assault has settled. And given the number of bombs America just dropped, that could be some time. Tom Clark, Sky News.
Time now for all the latest sports news with Nick.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
Andrea, 2 years on from your departure from Leeds United, how pleased are you?
Thank you for joining us this half hour. I'm David Dutton. Around Atlanta, America, and the world, this is Channel 1 America News. situation, the conflict that's going on in the Middle East, as the very latest, Iran has retaliated against the U.S. airstrikes Israel with over 20 missiles. Some of them got through, and actually Israel's defense system malfunctioned and started sending missiles or some sort of deflective defense system toward Haifa. Of course, an investigation will continue there. Let's get the very latest on what's happening this half hour.
No other military in the world. I join the President and the Secretary in being incredibly proud of the air crews, naval forces, cyber operators, planners, and it is their skill, discipline, and teamwork. It was of great concern to the President, the Secretary, deployed. I asked them to on their way home and our deployed service member in our thoughts. Our joint force remains ready to defend the United States.
Operation to our national interests posed by the Iranian nuclear program and the collective self-defense of our troops and our ally.
Was there a particular moment when the president signed
having the opportunity to witness his leadership, he was fully committed to the peace process. Wanted a negotiated outcome, gave Iran every single opportunity, and unfortunately was met by stonewalling, which is why he gave them plenty of time to continue to come to the table and give up enrichment, give up the nuclear program. But there was I won't say the particular moment, there was a time where he realized that it had to be a certain action taken in order to minimize the threat to us and our troops. Yeah.
General, you say that General Kurilla increased force protection in Iraq, Syria, and Gulf, in those areas. Were they given any advance warning the attacks were coming? And also, Mr. Secretary, when were congressional leaders notified? How long before the attacks took place?
Sure. To your first question, you know, the risk has clearly been rising over the last few weeks in the region. Based on that, and not a particular awareness of this operation, we've made smart decisions to minimize the risk to U.S. forces in the region.
So we get no advance warning?
No, sir.
And congressional?
They were notified after the planes were safely out. Well, we complied with the notification requirements of the War Powers Act.
The attacks, they were notified?
They were immediately thereafter. Yes.
Thank you, Secretary. Two brief questions. Do you believe you completely destroyed Iranian nuclear program? And how about Iranian ballistic missiles? Your ally Israel always saying that is biggest threat. And second question is very important. What will be your next step if Iran or militias under Iranian influence on the region attack U.S. interests or allies in the region?
And you can chime in on this too, Mr. Chairman. The battle damage assessment is ongoing, but our initial assessment, as the chairman said, is that all of our precision munitions struck where we wanted them to strike and had the desired effect, which means especially in Fordo, which was the primary target here, we believe we achieved destruction of capabilities there. Ultimately, wherever it may be, whether it's in Iraq or Syria or bases in the Gulf, as the president said, it would be, as the chairman said, it would be a very bad idea for Iran or its proxies to attempt to attack American forces. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Regarding retaliations, Iran and North Korea are cooperating on nuclear and missile development. Do you think there is a possibility that Iran, North Korea, and the other forces, such as China, will join forces to retaliate against the United States?
Well, unfortunately, because of the policies under the previous administration, we drove those countries together, and ultimately that creates a challenging environment. For this particular operation, the focus is on Iran and Iranian nuclear capabilities. That's our focus here, is to not just say that they can't have, but President Trump has said from over 20 years, frankly, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And ultimately, he decided this is the moment, given their stonewalling, when direct military action had to be taken to prevent that from happening. Yes?
Thank you very much. General Kane, I understand OPSEC, I respect OPSEC. Can you say at all what security procedures are being taken to protect U.S. troops in Iraq and elsewhere in the Middle East? And Secretary Hegseth, as a global war on terrorism veteran, what do you say to veterans who may be concerned the U.S. is getting into another open-ended war in the Middle East over weapons of mass destruction?
Thanks, sir, for the question. I won't comment on what force protection measures are being taken in the region. What I will say is we're being proactive and not reactive, and being very thoughtful about ensuring that we do all that we can to protect our forces out there.
And I would just say, as the president has directed and made clear, this is most certainly not open-ended. It doesn't mean it limits our ability to respond. We will respond if necessary. The most powerful military in the world is postured and prepared to defend our people. But what the president gave us, as I said, was a focused, powerful, and clear mission on the destruction of Iranian nuclear capabilities. Those were the targets. That's what was struck. That was overwhelming. That's what was overwhelming. That's what the Iranian regime needs to understand, as the president put out last night. He wants peace. There needs to be a negotiated settlement here. We ultimately demonstrated that Iran cannot have a nuclear capability. That is a very clear mission set on this operation. Yes, hold on. Yes, right there.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Question for the Secretary and the Chairman. How was this strike coordinated with the Israelis on a strategic level, militarily, and on a tactical level? Was there any direct Israeli military participation in this operation?
Well, I would say certainly Israel had an incredible military success, especially at the beginning and ongoing, in degrading Iranian capabilities, in degrading Iranian launchers, MRBMs. It's been incredible to watch what our ally Israel has been able to do. And there certainly have been conversations. I mean, General Kurilla at CENTCOM has worked closely in the defense of Israel for many years. And part of this operation was the defense of Israel and the ongoing defense of Israel. But as it pertains to this strike, this was U.S. operated and U.S. led.
We took advantage of some of the preparatory work that's been done over the past week and a half in terms of axis of approach. I won't get into the particulars, but as the Secretary said, it was a U.S. strike. We made sure we were not in the same piece of airspace and sky. Aside from that, that was the extent of it.
We'll take a couple more. Yeah, right there.
Question to the Secretary first. Are you concerned whatsoever now about the reaction from U.S. allies given the strike, particularly those in the Gulf? And to the Chairman, if I may, I understand you don't want to speak to specific assets and force protection measures, but do you anticipate at least having to bring in any further assets from other theaters to aid in force protection over the coming days?
We certainly understand the challenges of allies in the region, and we have been respectful and in working in collaboration with them as it pertains to basing and sensitivities there. Ultimately, they've got a lot of assets and people in those locations also where American troops are co-located. So that's a consideration of ours. We've been in close consultation with them, and we appreciate the support that we have got.
Thanks for the question on sort of the global picture. And as you know, that's one of my jobs, is to look globally at the entire range of challenges. We are always carefully considering our force posture around the world and then offering options to the Secretary and to the President. I won't comment on any future things, but the American people should know that we carefully consider those moves around the world and try to modulate as needed our force structure in the region.
Absolutely. Yeah, right here.
Thank you. What communications are being sent to the Iranians right now, and is there any possibility of diplomacy now or in the coming days?
I can only confirm that there are both public and private being directly delivered to the Iranians in multiple channels, giving them every opportunity to come to the table. They understand precisely what the American position is, precisely what steps they can take to allow for peace, and we hope they do so. Yes.
The president may not want an open-ended conflict. The Iranians may disagree. Are you prepared for a protracted war?
Well, anything can happen in conflict, we acknowledge that, but the scope of this was intentionally limited. That's the message that we're sending. With the capabilities of the American military, nearly unlimited. Iran, in that sense, has a choice. But we've made it very clear to them, this is nuclear sites, this is nuclear capabilities, this is the line that the president set, and we set that back. Now is the time to come forward for peace, but I think one of the takeaways from this as well is the unprecedented level of ongoing cooperation. I can't speak highly enough of the chairman and his staff and General Kurilla in CENTCOM, what they've done to look around the corner, to pre-position, to understand how an operation like this comes together. The scope and scale of what occurred last night would take the breath away of almost any American if you had an opportunity to watch it in real time. And I think Tehran is certainly calculating the reality that planes flew from the middle of America in Missouri overnight, completely undetected over 3 of their most highly sensitive sites, and we were able to destroy nuclear capabilities, and our boys in those bombers are on their way home right now. We believe that'll have a clear psychological impact on how they view the future, and we certainly hope they take the path of negotiated peace. But I could not be more proud of how this building operated, of the precision, the sensitivity, and the professionalism of the troops involved in this effort. I will take one more. We'll take one more question. Yes, right there.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Concerning the justification for these strikes, in March, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released their threat assessment, concluding, quote, Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear programs he suspended in 2003, unquote. So what new intelligence does the U.S. have since then that the Iranians have changed their position on nuclear weapons? And does this new intelligence come from U.S. sources and methods, or are we getting this information from other countries?
Well, I would just simply say that the president's made it very clear. He's looked at all of this, all of the intelligence, all of the information, and come to the conclusion that the Iranian nuclear program is a threat, and was willing to take this precision operation to neutralize that threat in order to advance American national interests, reduce the Iranian nuclear program, and obviously collective self-defense of ourselves and our allies. So he looked at all of it, understood the nature of the threat, and took bold action I think the American people would expect in a commander-in-chief. That's all we've got. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, do you have any of the WC-135s up to check the radioactive material in the atmosphere?
Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as well as Secretary Hegseth. We saw Jen Griffin, Fox's Pentagon correspondent. 11:42 in the nation's capital, about 18 minutes to midnight, 8:42 out west. We continue to look at these live vantage points in Tel Aviv. That's Jerusalem. And a live look at the White House, where we hear that President Trump will have a meeting with his national security team tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time Monday. I'd be curious to know if he's going to have any open press events tomorrow, if we will see the White House press pool be given an opportunity to do some Q&A with the president. I'm also curious if there's going to be a White House press briefing tomorrow morning with Caroline Leavitt, a State Department press briefing with Tammy Bruce. We just obviously saw that there was a Pentagon press briefing earlier today. So that's where we stand for now. A live look. Morning hours there in Tel Aviv. It is time for us to head to a quick commercial break. Our coverage continuing in a moment. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back in Alive Now. I'm Austin Westfall, live look at the White House. Let's get out to Benjamin Netanyahu's remarks. He did speak earlier today on the U.S.'s strikes in Iran. Here's Netanyahu.
Well, let me start with the last part of your question. I decided that we should attack Iran because I've been talking about it for only 40 years. 40 years. And I saw the rise of the Islamic Republic, that is this theological thuggery that hijacked this gifted people, this ancient gifted people who are friends of ours from the time of the great Persian King Cyrus, 2,500 years ago. They were hijacked by these thugs, and they've been oppressed for 46 years. They basically used Iran as a platform to export their revolutionary, terrorist, Islamist ideology to every part of the Middle East, attacking our Arab neighbors and seeking to attack America. Death to America, death to Israel. Death to Israel was an intermediate step before they can deliver death to America, because Israel prevented from conquering the Middle East. So they set out, I could see that decades ago, that if they had the weapons of mass death, if they had nuclear weapons, they would very well use them. They could very well use them. And I tried in many ways to block this. Through successive governments that I led, I wasn't always able to muster the majority that I needed or the support of the security establishment. I had to also resist a plan by an American president to do an agreement that I thought paved Iran's path with gold to nuclear enrichment. So in every way that I could, I tried to stop Iran, and in fact, we did stop them. Also by dealing, I can say this openly now, by taking out scientists during successive terms in office and other means that we used. We delayed them by about a decade, but we didn't stop them. We saw that after I gave the instructions to knock out Nasrallah, that basically that knocked out Assad in Syria, the Assad regime in Syria. And now we knew that Iran had lost the other means that they were planning to annihilate Israel with. That noose of death around us, the Iran terror axis collapsed. And at that point, we saw clearly with our intel that they were moving rapidly towards what is called weaponization. They had enough enriched uranium because we could delay them, but we couldn't stop them from enriching uranium. So they had enough of that, 9 or 10 bombs worth of enriched uranium. But they needed to make the bomb itself. And the bomb itself, they rushed to do right after the collapse of the terror axis and the removal of Nasrallah. Therefore, we had to act. We were in the 12th hour. We knew that we wouldn't have a 13th hour if they succeeded. And simultaneously, we also saw that they decided after they had attacked us and we had counterattacked them and destroyed a lot of their missile production capability, ballistic missile production capability, that they were actually developing a plan to build 300 ballistic missiles a month. That's 20,000 missiles in 6 years. And you can imagine how a country the size of New Jersey, would it survive with 20,000 one-ton missiles falling on the heads of its citizens? Obviously not. So on both counts, we had to act and to stop this plan to annihilate, this dual plan to annihilate the state of Israel. That's what forced the decision. It happened the directive was given about 6 months ago. And I shared everything that I'm telling you now with our dear friend, our great ally, and your great leader, President Donald J. Trump. I told him of our need to act. He understood it very well. And I knew that when push comes to shove, he would do the right thing. He would do the right thing for America. He would do the right thing for the free world. He would do the right thing for civilization. He helped us a lot in defending the skies of Israel with THAAD batteries here, with Aegis ships in the Mediterranean, with American pilots flying alongside our pilots shooting down drones. And then he decided, and we talked about it, he decided to act to ensure that Iran does not have nuclear weapons, and therefore that Iran does not have nuclear enrichment capability. I trusted him, and I think that he's proven what a great leader he is, and what a great friend of Israel he is. Second to none, and none can compare with him.
Thank you, sir.
Last question, CNN.
Prime Minister Netanyahu, after your military success in Iran, will you agree to a comprehensive end of the war in Gaza in exchange for a release of all the hostages? Did President Trump tell you he would strike Iran if you agreed to a comprehensive end of the war in Gaza? And where is Iran's 400+ kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%? Thank you.
Well, President Trump didn't put any conditions. This is not the nature of our relationship, I have to say. We speak openly, we speak as friends, genuine friends. And he's a great leader, but he makes the decisions for America. Did I know? Yes, I knew in advance. That's natural. Just as he knew in advance when we would act, we knew in advance when he would act. I think that as far as Gaza is concerned, look, this war could end tomorrow. It could end today. If Hamas surrenders lays down its arms, releases all the hostages, it's over. It's over in a moment. They refuse to do that. I think our actions in Iran will help us expedite our victory and the release of all our hostages. And that's what we hope to achieve. We think we can give Gaza a different future. Not this repeat that Hamas is reinstated. Yeah, we knock it down, but it's reinstated, rearms itself, and keeps delivering misery to its own people, and then misery and death to us and everyone else around them. So that can change. It could change tomorrow. I hope it does. But I have a plan for a permanent peace. If that's what you're asking me, yes, I do. And we're prepared to enter negotiations right now on the proposal that Mr. Witkoff gave. We received from intermediaries some response to that proposal. I responded to the response, and I'm waiting to receive a response to my response. Can you follow that? So we're active in this thing all the time. And I would hope that we could gain this, this platform by which we would have basically a 2-month ceasefire. We'd get half the hostages, the living and the dead, and then discuss the possibility of the permanent ceasefire. And this is the line that I would present in those discussions. In any case, you should know that the contacts are continuing as we speak all the time. We're obviously focused on Iran, but we never forget Gaza. We never forget our hostages or our war goals there. You asked about the enriched uranium. Well, look, we're following that. We've been following it very closely. I can tell you that it's an important component of a nuclear program. It's not the sole component. It's not a sufficient component, but it is an important component. And we have interesting intel on that, which you'll excuse me if I don't share with you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any more questions? יש עוד שאלות? אז אני רוצה...
Okay, he goes into Hebrew for the rest of that, so we're going to step away. It is about time for us to head off the air anyway. We do appreciate you all sticking around with us as we've gone into extended coverage mode to cover this very, very busy news weekend. I'm Austin Westfall. It's about time for me to head off the air and send it to the overnight playlist. Before I do that, I'm going to let you know that we come back on the air tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Eastern Time. Our East Coast-based newsroom has you covered. Of course, we'll be discussing the latest on the strikes in Iran. We know that Israel and Iran are continuing to trade strikes. There has not been any further military activity between the U.S. and Iran since those strikes happened yesterday. So our crew has you covered when we come back on the air tomorrow at 7 a.m. Eastern Time. For now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send it to a commercial break. On the other side of that, you will see our overnight playlist. The playlist starts with my interview with Dr. Alon Burstein. It's a 45-minute long extended segment on just about every facet of the war that we could try to cover in that amount of time. It's a wide-ranging interview. That's what's going to play to start the playlist. All right, have a good night. We'll see you soon.
That's our report for this half hour. Thank you for joining us. Around Atlanta, America, and the world, it's Channel 1 America News. Stay with us. The news continues.
as we continue to discuss the Israel-Iran conflict and, of course, the U.S.'s strikes within Iran yesterday. It's now been about 24 hours since it happened. A live look at the White House, where it's just past 9 p.m. in the nation's capital. Also, our normal live vantage points of Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, where it's the early morning hours Monday morning there. We're starting off our coverage tonight with Dr. Alon Burstein. We're going to be doing an extended segment with Alon. Alon, this is the first time that you and I have talked since yesterday's strikes. You and I have talked on the weekly just about since October 7th, 2023. We have followed the war in Gaza. We've talked extensively about the history of the conflicts in the Middle East. I got to ask you, this is something that came up to me earlier today. Is it fair to say, Alon, that the October 7th attack or the near elimination of all of Israel's prime foes?
It's good to see you, Austin. There's a lot of people who are trying to frame it that way, primarily within the Israeli government right now. I think it's a little premature to say. Only 2 months ago, talking about the revolution in Syria as a jihadi revolution. They were talking about Ahmed Ashara as the new descendant of Osama bin Laden that is fooling the West and everything. And then the moment Trump met with Ashara in Saudi Arabia and decided that, he was going to remove the sanctions in Syria and give Syria a chance, all of a sudden Israel's negotiating with Ashara and talking to him as the best friend. So things are very fluid within the Middle East. Hezbollah has been largely, I wouldn't say defeated, but certainly deterred, and its power in Lebanon and as a threat to Israel has shrunk dramatically. That's not the first time that happened to Hezbollah. It's certainly the first time it happened to Hezbollah in the last 20 years. But prior to that, Hezbollah had been hit time and again in the 90s, in the early 2000s, and it managed to rebuild its strength. We really don't know. The Middle East is an extremely volatile place. Right now, the way we are standing right now in June of 2025, there are certainly less active actors that are threatening Israel than there were on October 6th of 2023. With regards to the external enemies of Israel, if we look at Hezbollah, if we look at the militias that were operating freely under the Assad regime in Syria, if we look at Iran, certainly there are those on the one hand. On the other hand, over the last week, millions of Israelis have been in bunkers. Israeli streets are looking, I hate to say it, but to some extent, parts of them are looking like Gaza with the extent of 1-ton missiles that are being dropped on them. And that is still going on. There were alerts that went off in Tel Aviv an hour ago, and missiles were fired. And last night at this hour, missiles struck Nes Ziona, Haifa, and Tel Aviv. It's a constant fluctuating situation. Iran is certainly weakened and deterred. Israel has shown a lot of superiority in its military, and certainly with the United States' help in Iran. But the situation is still fluid, and something we haven't spoken about in the last couple of weeks. Gaza's still there. Hamas is still alive. Active fighting still happened. 3 IDF soldiers were killed just in the last week. So it's true that Israel, the different enemies that prior to October 7th had been sort of standing tall, each and every one of them has been beaten back, some quite severely. I would, though, say it's premature to say they've disappeared and that that the threats have been removed.
We saw Secretary of State Marco Rubio earlier today appearing on Fox News Alone. He says the U.S. is not at war with Iran. That was the first question they asked him, point blank, are we at war? He said no. You study wars, Alon. How is war defined, and does the situation between the U.S. and Iran fall within that definition?
A wonderful question. I'm going to try not to give too much of an academic answer because there's lots of definitions of war, right? Some people say that war is when a country employs violence against another country that leads to a certain amount of deaths. So some people define it by the amount of deaths. Because if there's cross-border insurgencies like between India and Pakistan, or even between Israel and Syria, does that constitute a war at that point? At what point does it have to be a war? Do the sides have to declare war? That used to be the thing. Prior to World War II, it was a custom that enemies would declare war before they went to war. The United States declared war on Japan when it went to war, declared war on Nazi Germany. So some people associate war with that. The current context, though, are you at war or are you not at war, has a lot more to do, I always bring you back to this, with internal politics. There are a lot of repercussions to the United States officially saying that if it goes to war, this means that different committees have to be convened. This means this has implications with regards to budgets. This has implications with regards to who is in charge of what when it comes to deploying military and etc., as opposed to a military operation. A military operation is something that the president can order. There's the dispute whether he needs congressional approval or not. But either way, the fact is that is something that's a lot easier to actually declare in the United States rather than declaring war. Something that I'll also add, there is, for similar reasons and a reverse situation, that Israel declared war on Hamas on October 7th, 2023. That, when a lot of people asked me then, what is the meaning of that? I said, it's for internal political reasons. Israel had been fighting Hamas since Hamas was created, and certainly since, the Hamas took over the Gaza Strip in 2007 or October 7th, 2023. Declaring war was done for internal political reasons. It liberated a lot of the political restraints that the Israeli government would have with regards to deploying troops and making decisions, setting up a war cabinet, and things like that. The United States right now is in a reverse position. Trump does not want to be in a position where this is a declared war. He wants this to be a military operation. And the last thing I'll say, that also has to do with Trump's external policy. It's not just about towards internal politics. Externally, he wants the message to Iran to be, we don't want to be at war. Trump does not like wars. We do not want to be at war. We wanted this to be a military operation. And as far as we're concerned, it can be done. Now the ball's in your court. Do you want it to be done or not? If Trump would say, no, this is a war, okay, then Iran's at war. And the United States are at war. Whereas Iran could theoretically decide today, we're not retaliating and that's it. And then there is no war. Then that was an operation and it's over.
Let's read some of what President Trump has said. He posted this. It's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? Make Iran great again, he says. How significant is the appetite for regime change among the Iranian public alone? Will the supreme leader likely need to be eliminated to cause regime change, or can a regime change happen without him being targeted?
So when I saw, that message that was put out by Trump, first of all, I chuckled about his hatred of political correctness and things like that, which I thought was an interesting anecdote that he threw in. But in general, it really mimicked to me a little bit the progression that happened within the Israeli government over the last week when Israel initially launched its attack on Iran on June 13th. It openly said that it is not going for regime change, that it is going for the nuclear facilities, the ballistic capabilities, the way Iran is a threat to Israel. Then, with the seeming success of the initial attacks, the mass amounts of assassinations that Israel successfully carried out, the attacks on the nuclear sites, and Iran's complete collapse of its defense capabilities, all of a sudden in Israel, they started to talk about regime change. They started to talk about maybe yes, and they started to attack also the different symbols of government. Similarly, when the United States launched the initial bombing, CBS reported that the Trump administration actually sent messages to Iran saying we are not interested in regime change. We are not looking to attack the regime. We're only going after the nuclear facilities. Don't feel like this is now something that your life is in danger of the life of the regime. This is the nuclear facilities, and it can end there. But possibly with the success of that and the fact that Iran has not come back to a deal yet, maybe the appetite has grown in the United States as well. So that's just, in terms of the progression over the last 24 hours, that's a very different style message coming out from the administration than happened when the attack was launched. Now, in terms of what are the possibilities for regime change in Iran, we talk about this a lot. We often say, and it's being thrown around the Middle East, certainly in Israel, Europe, the United States, maybe there'll just be a regime change. It's not that simple. There is a strong opposition in Iran. There are supporters of the sons of the Shah. There are supporters of a more broad revolution. Some are just reformists. Some want the entire system of the Islamic Republic taken down and to restore the days of a much more westernized society. Some talk about democracy. Some talk about other things. There's also communist elements there still. At the same time, if we look comparatively in the region, it's not always a straight line that you just topple an oppressive regime and then all of a sudden a flourishing democracy. Obviously we have the damning examples of Afghanistan and Iraq and saying if we just decapitate the leadership, a thriving democracy will flourish. We have seen that that's not true. But even if we look deeper, even if we look at, okay, let's say it's not just about decapitation, let's say it's about the actual people uprising. Throughout 2011, 2012, all the way until the beginning of this year with Syria, we've seen a lot of changes that happened in the Middle East. Called the Arab Spring, Iran, not an Arab country, but certainly within the Middle East. And the nature of the regime really has an effect on, even if there is a rebellion, how does it play out? And when we saw situations where there was, I will say, simple dictatorship, so to speak, when it wasn't a very strong government leadership set up, it was a dictator that was simply oppressing the people, like in Libya, like in Yemen, like in Syria. In those situations, when there was a rebellion, eventually the country almost disintegrates. Syria, we're not sure where it's going yet, but in Yemen and in Libya, there's the decapitation, so to speak, and then different factions come up. In turn, in countries like Egypt, where there was Arab Spring and Hosni Mubarak was thrown out of office, there, the regime very quickly reestablished itself within 2 years and was able to rebuild. And now we have, Sisi as president who is not as oppressive as Mubarak, but is not that different either in terms of oppressing the opposition. Similarly in Iran, Iran is not just a ruthless dictator that is ruling alone, Khamenei, and has no following, and if you decapitate him, then all of a sudden the entire regime. That's what happened in Syria. Assad left, and all of his advisors and all the military all of a sudden just disintegrated. Iran is built, the regime is built on a much more solid ground. It has political parties that it allows to run as opposition and coalition in order to keep up the pretense of some sort of democracy, some sort of elections. It has a lot of support within the different social fabrics within the country. There's a lot of opposition, but also a lot of social support. So it's not going to be such a smooth process. Even if Khamenei, which we're seeing on screen right now, even if he was killed, he was assassinated, he has already signaled out in the last week in anticipation of his possible assassination. He's already signaled the 3 potential successors that should take over in his place. Now, so if he's gone, again, unlike Libya, where Gaddafi was gone and then there was no continuation to his administration, here, there would be an organic continuation. Now, it's possible there will be a mass rebellion and everything will change. It is also equally likely, though, if he's assassinated, there'll be a new leader that will come up, maybe. I think for a couple of reasons. One, I think that countries are probably leaving that as an additional option. They're constantly saying, we can do this. And again, Israel openly said initially that it was not going to target the Supreme Leader, then said, well, actually, no one has immunity. And when the hospital in Israel in Beersheba was hit, all of a sudden Israel said we're going to up the ante and started to say that like Yahya Sinwar and like Ismail Haniyeh, who was assassinated in Tehran, all such leaders like Khamenei know what their destiny is, which is already implying he will be assassinated. So possibly Israel's looking to this, but they want to keep this as a card in their back pocket. So that's one thing. They want it to be a constant threat. A second possibility is that there is a genuine fear of who may come next. Khamenei is relatively old. He's, certainly an extremist in every sense of the word, but there are more extremists that may come up, and certainly a young, charismatic leader who might replace him, who then wants also to take vengeance for his assassination, could be a worse option. Also possible that his replacement would be a reformist and someone who would say, okay, we're done with the nuclear program, it only brought devastation to us. That's possible. But I think there is fear about that. And a third facet that has to be remembered is we are used to, when we talk about the Middle East, we're used to talking about asymmetrical warfare. We are used to talking about, these quote-unquote targeted assassinations of the leaders of Hamas, of Hezbollah, of Al-Qaeda, of ISIS. This is different. This is the, like it or not, accepted legitimate leader, whether it's actually legitimate by the people or not, by international law. It is the accepted legitimate leader of a country. It is very complicated internationally to justify such an assassination. Does that mean that it wouldn't happen? No, absolutely not. It could happen, and Israel could, bear the brunt of it, or theoretically the United States or anyone could bear the brunt of it. But it's not something that would have any acceptance by international law, and also has a lot less precedent. A country assassinating the leader of another country, and this has been talked about a lot with Iran possibly trying to assassinate Donald Trump. A country assassinating the leader of another country is very different than a country assassinating the leadership of a terror organization. So we look at Iran and see the support for Hezbollah, the support for the Houthis, the support for Hamas, but it is still a functioning country, and that also adds a lot of layers of complication, I would suggest.
We got some video alone of the B-2 bombers returning home after the military operation. This is not live. Iran says that it will decide the timing, nature, and scale of its response to the attacks. This has made lots and lots of Americans wonder, what is Iran capable of, whether it be in terms of, as they put it, they don't know the timing, the nature, and the scale. What is their military capabilities at this point, and what avenues do they have to hit the U.S. back?
So the military capabilities of conventional forces are relatively, I won't say intact, but they certainly have not been hit as hard as other targets in Iran, because Israel's been the one that's been hitting the targets. And, something we've spoken about in our last several broadcasts, Israel's not that threat from Iran's conventional military and ground forces, with the exception of the ballistic missiles. So Israel has attacked the Air Force in Iran, it has attacked old F-14 planes that they have, it has attacked F-5 planes and things like that, helicopters, but it hasn't gone after Iran's entire Navy, for example, which it does have, because Israel's not that threatened by the Navy. It hasn't gone after a lot of the ground forces. That said, those ground forces and the Navy would be no match for the United States. Iran would very likely not want to enter into a head-to-head military collision with the United States. We've seen this again in Iraq, we've seen this in Afghanistan, we've seen it in lots of places recently where the United States has intervened. The U.S. will suffer losses, but at the end of the day, it does have the more advanced military, and it would succeed. So Iran now is saying that in order to leave all options open. It's a little bit like when Trump says, maybe I'll attack more, maybe I won't. You can come talk to me. Iran is saying, look, we reserve the option to retaliate however we want. Come talk to me. They're trying to play that same game. In terms of what are their options, so first of all, there's the proxy option. That has been argued to be the most likely option, that Iran will activate either the Houthis to start attacking U.S. interests or even just Israeli or Western interests in the Red Sea, possibly activate other militias in Jordan and in Iraq. And that's the reason that we've seen the United States pull out a lot of its forces and diplomatic missions from these different countries. It is also possible that Iran will activate cells that it has against Western targets more broadly. This could be in Europe. Hezbollah in 1994 carried out an attack targeting Jews and Israelis in Argentina. Like they have the capability to also activate sleeper cells across the different areas. But again, if that's done by proxy, that will be an indication that Iran, again, does not want to go head-to-head with the United States. You attack us, all of a sudden, your embassy will be blown up somewhere in Africa. You attack us, all of a sudden, a militia will attack your military bases, but you could retaliate against us, but it's not us trying to go to war. So that's one option, is the proxy option. Another option is Iran could launch an attack either against U.S. interests, not the U.S. specifically, U.S. interests. So that could be further attacks on Israel, more harsher ballistic missiles that are fired. And Iran does have harsher ballistic missiles that it's fired so far, possibly carrying out some sort of terror attacks against Israeli interests. Again, Iran's conventional army may not get to Israel, but it does have agents that could try to carry out an attack against an embassy or Israelis abroad. Again, that would be attacks against American interests that might happen coming from Iran directly. A third option would be attacking U.S. bases in the region, and that I would say Iran would, again, probably not do as a soldiers storming a base and trying to take it over. Iran does not want to bear the brunt of the retaliation. That would probably be more in the form of a drone attack or something that happened that all of a sudden drones detonated in U.S. bases. Not saying that that wouldn't cause death and carnage, but but it would be something that would be seen within the game between the countries. You're not at war. Okay, we're not at war. You admitted to bombing out our facilities. We sent some drones and they attacked your barracks. Some people died here, some people died there, and we're done. So I imagine that those are the options that Iran is weighing, whether it wants to go by proxies, whether it wants to attack U.S. interests in sort of a roundabout way, or try to carry out a symbolic attack against the U.S. and admitting to it from Iran itself. But I emphasize it'll be very likely symbolic, because Iran, for all of its big talk, really does not want to end up bearing the brunt of a counterattack by the United States that would be much worse.
Sleeper cell has become one of the most Googled search terms in the past 24 hours alone. What is a sleeper cell? Why are people so curious about this idea?
So sleeper cells are a concept that really is associated with the world of terrorism. And essentially what that means is slightly different than 9/11. What that means is that you send people who are affiliated with your typically organization, but it equally could be a country. And certainly in the era of the Cold War, this was affiliated a lot with both the United States and the Soviet Union. And you send them to enemy territory without a mission. You send them there to live, but they are loyal to you. They're loyal to you, and they could be activated at any point to carry out a specific mission. That is different than 9/11. 9/11, the hijackers were sent by Al-Qaeda with those plans. With the plans, some have argued with the date, some have argued they didn't know the exact date that it would be carried out, but they went, they infiltrated the United States, they scoured their mission, their area, they learned how to fly, they learned how to bypass security. That's not a sleeper cell. That's an active cell. That's a cell that's there, that's constantly working on the attack. A sleeper cell, in turn, is if Iran might have sent some agents, or not even agents, just people who are loyal to the regime, and said, go live in New York. Go live in New York. Live a life. One day, you'll get a message. You'll get a message that says, go do this. And then you're activated. You become an active cell. The reason that that is so scary to most people is that, one, it could be anyone, and that ferments a lot of fear in the population. All of a sudden, wait a minute, you immigrated from here to there, what does that say about you? And two, it is a lot harder for counterterrorism measures to intercept, as opposed to an active cell that is always working. Theoretically, if the apartments of the 9/11 attackers would have been raided and their computers actually opened and looked at, the plans would have been discovered. A sleeper cell often doesn't even know what the plans are. They are activated at a point in time. So that is something that now everyone is fearful of because, again, it goes back to the Cold War era, but in this case, Iran theoretically could have agents that are spread around the world that they will try to activate in order to carry out that attack. And again, the big thing with that is deniability, because these are people who have lived somewhere else now for X amount of time. They're not soldiers of the regime. You attacked Iran. Suddenly now your embassy has blown up. Suddenly now something has happened, and that would give Iran the deniability that it would want to try to avoid the retaliation.
So, you mentioned this earlier, the idea that just within the past hour or two, we've still heard of strikes from Iran targeting Israel. Catch us up. A lot of us have been focusing on the U.S.-Iran piece of everything, but as you said, the Israel-Iran piece has not gone anywhere. What's been happening as of late? Are we still seeing Israel and Iran trading strikes, or is this a one-way street at this point, Iran toward Israel?
Oh, no. They're both trading strikes. Israel has been carrying out airstrikes in Iran every night since the operation started, what Israel has named the Operation Rising Lion. Airstrikes every night. Iran has fired missiles towards Israel almost every night and some days. That is still ongoing. Israel has issued several contradictory statements. The official statements have been, complete glee and thank and awe of the U.S. for carrying out those bombing raids, and at the same time saying, but that doesn't end our campaign. Our campaign isn't over. We still have a bank of targets. We still want to make sure the nuclear facilities are destroyed. We still want to make sure the ballistic missiles are destroyed. And again, that term bank of targets is deliberately vague because that may include also regime targets that aren't just nuclear targets or ballistic missile targets, but also targets that are affiliated with the regime. On the one hand, Israel has said publicly that this does not end our mission. On the other hand, Israel has also said more anonymously, sources within the government, which usually is the government itself, have also opened the possibility that Israel would actually be willing to recognize an end to the ongoing escalation. No one's talking realistically about any agreement between Israel and Iran. Even when Trump said now is the time for peace, I don't think even Trump thinks that he's going to bring Iran and Israel to a peace treaty at this point. But the tacit agreement between the countries being possibly the two countries will agree, we are done now. We're not retaliating against each other. We've seen this. We saw this in April and in October, November of 2024.